Ask a quiet person how they're actually doing. Then watch how fast fine leaves their mouth. Sometimes it comes out before they have even had a full second to check if it is true. Most people simply assume that means there's not much going on underneath. Psychology says it's usually the opposite. It's not an empty story at all. It's a full one that quietly stopped being spoken out loud a long time before you ever met them. Someone at the grocery checkout asks how you're doing today. You say good, thanks, before the question has even finished landing. It wasn't a lie exactly. It also wasn't true. It was just the fastest answer available, and you gave it without checking first, the same way you'd catch a ball thrown at you before deciding whether you wanted to catch it. You do this far more than you'd probably ever admit out loud. In line at the coffee shop, on the phone with your mother, standing in a doorway saying goodbye to someone you actually wanted to talk to longer if you'd known how to start. That habit gets built for very real reasons, and by the end of this, you may recognize the exact moment that taught your mouth to move faster than your truth. It often starts early, and it is rarely dramatic. Picture a kid on a bike, knees scraped, crying harder than the scrape itself really calls for. An adult crouches down and says, "Get up, you're fine. It's not that deep." Nobody meant harm by it. It was probably said 100 times before to 100 other kids, and most of them shrugged it off within the hour. But some kids file it differently. Not as an insult, as data. The lesson isn't spoken, but it lands anyway. Big feelings get you a faster version of comfort, not a longer one. They noticed that showing the hurt didn't bring comfort. It brought a faster instruction to stop showing it. So the next time something actually hurt, worse than a scraped knee, they skipped the part where they said so. This repeats in smaller ways for years. A parent too tired to ask twice. A sibling's problem that always seemed to matter more. A teacher who said everyone struggles, so stop making it a thing. None of it looks cruel from the outside. It rarely is. But a young mind is always taking notes, and the note it takes here is simple. Talking about this doesn't change anything, so why keep doing it? There's usually a specific age where it settles in for good. Somewhere around the point a kid stops crying in front of people and starts crying in the shower instead, where the water covers the sound and nobody has to manage anyone's reaction to it. That's not a small shift. That's the exact moment privacy turns into a strategy. By the time that kid is grown, the pattern doesn't feel like a decision anymore. It feels like personality. Quiet, easygoing, low maintenance. Nobody around them realizes those words are describing a habit that was built, not a nature that was born. If you remember the first moment you learned to say fine instead of the truth, drop fine in the comments. Not the whole story, just the word. Another layer runs even quieter, and it has less to do with trust than with the fear of costing someone something. A friend gets married, and in the middle of the celebration, you're standing there having just lost a job 3 days earlier, and someone asks if you're doing okay. You say more than okay. Are you kidding? Look at this place. You are not lying to be polite. You're guarding the celebration, not yourself. This is not your day to need anything. Later, you stand outside the apartment door with the key in your hand. Just a few extra seconds. Long enough to let the day catch up before your face has to look normal again. People who never open up usually aren't avoiding closeness. They're avoiding becoming one more weight for people who already seem to be carrying enough. They learned somewhere that being easy to be around was worth more than being fully known. So they became easy. Endlessly, reliably easy. They listen well. They remember your birthday. They show up early to help you move and never once mention that their own week fell apart. Ask them how they are, and you get a quick answer, delivered with a smile that's doing actual work to stay in place. There's a specific kind of tired that comes from being the one everyone leans on. It is not visible from the outside, because it is not loud. It shows up as slower replies. Another night staring at the ceiling. Small changes nobody connects to anything, because the person carrying it made sure nobody had enough clues. This is not modesty. It is math they run without noticing. If I say what's really going on, it costs everyone something. If I don't, things stay easy, and I stay the one who's easy to have around. If this gave language to something you usually carry quietly, give it a like. It helps this reach the people who need to hear it phrased out loud. Then there is the habit everyone mistakes for strength. They just handle things. Not because independence ever felt exciting. Because somewhere along the way, needing something from someone else started to feel too uncertain. A car breaks down on a back road at 11 at night. There's a phone in the passenger seat with people in it who would absolutely come. The tire gets changed anyway, alone, cold hands and bad light. Because calling someone means explaining, and explaining means being seen mid-struggle, and mid-struggle was never a look this person got comfortable wearing. Sometimes it is smaller. A leaking sink fixed at midnight with a video tutorial and a borrowed wrench. All while a father who would have driven over in 10 minutes never even knows there was a problem. The instinct to solve it privately, alone, wins almost every time, even when the easier option was sitting right there. Psychologists have a name for defaulting to handling everything solo instead of reaching out. It works in the short term. It also builds a wall around a person that they didn't consciously choose to build. Ask, and they'll say they just prefer doing it themselves. It sounds like preference. It usually started as necessity. There is another kind of silence almost nobody names correctly, because it is not really about hiding at all. It is about not having the words. Someone asks what's wrong, standing in the kitchen, actually wanting to know, and the honest answer is nothing forms. Not silence out of stubbornness. A real blank. There's a feeling, heavy and specific, and no clean label for it. Not quite sad. Not quite angry. Somewhere between tired and unfinished, and none of that fits in a sentence that won't sound strange said out loud. The fridge hums in the background. The question just sits there, patient, waiting for an answer that isn't ready to exist yet. So the answer that comes out is nothing. I'm just tired, which is true and also not the whole truth, because the whole truth doesn't have a shape yet. Try describing a color you have never actually seen with your own eyes. That's close to what this feels like from the inside. The feeling is real and present and undeniable, but the language for it hasn't been built yet, and building it on the spot, under someone's expectant gaze, feels almost impossible. This isn't avoidance either. It's the gap between feeling something fully and being able to name it precisely enough to hand it to someone else. That gap is wider for some people than others, and almost nobody warns you it exists. If a quiet person in your life always answers, "I don't know," when you ask what's wrong, there is a chance they are not avoiding you. They may be telling the truth in the only language they have at that moment. And sometimes, one bad experience locks the whole pattern in place for good. Not always a huge one, just one the brain never forgot. Maybe it was a partner who rolled their eyes halfway through. Maybe it was a friend who said, "Honestly, you're overreacting," before the sentence was even finished. Maybe it was something said with good intentions that still landed like a verdict, a well-meaning "at least it's not worse" that made the whole thing feel smaller and somehow also more alone than before you'd said anything at all. Whatever it was, the brain does what brains do. It logs the outcome. Opened up once. Got hurt for it. New rule, don't do that again. The strange part is how small the original moment often really was. Not a betrayal. Not a scandal. Just a beat too much silence after a sentence that took real effort to say out loud, or a quick change of subject that felt more like relief than actual support. Small enough that the other person probably forgot it within the week. Big enough that it became a rule that ran underground for years afterward. From that point forward, silence isn't cold. It's protective. It's not that this person stopped needing anyone to understand them. It's that understanding started to feel like a gamble they'd already lost once, and nobody chooses to place the same losing bet twice without a very good reason. So if you've never opened up, not fully, not to most people, it doesn't mean something is missing in you. It usually means you learned, at some point, that handling it alone made more sense. And for a long time, that calculation probably worked. But staying quiet still costs something, even when everyone else calls it strength. It can get lonely in a way that's hard to explain to anyone, partly because explaining it is the exact thing you've spent years avoiding. Here's the part that's easy to miss. The people around you aren't necessarily failing to notice you at all. Some of them are waiting, without fully knowing how to say so, for a version of a conversation you've never once let them have. They have heard the quick answers often enough to know when a door is being kept almost closed. Eventually, they stop pushing. Not because they stopped caring. Because pushing felt like the wrong move with someone who looked so capable of handling everything. And this is how the pattern keeps itself alive. The better you get at seeming fine, the less anyone thinks to ask twice. The less anyone asks twice, the more the whole thing starts to feel normal. You do not owe anyone your whole story at once. You are allowed to start with one honest sentence instead of handing over everything. You are allowed to test one person before deciding whether they have earned the next sentence. But it may be worth noticing who keeps standing close, even when you keep giving them almost nothing to hold. Because sometimes the first honest sentence is not dramatic. It is not a confession that changes the whole room. It is just, I have not been as okay as I look. Or, I do not know how to explain it yet, but something has been heavy. That kind of sentence may feel small. For a person who has survived by staying unreadable, it can feel like handing someone a fragile thing for the first time and waiting to see how careful they are with it. Send this to someone who always says they are fine a little too fast. Thank you for watching until this moment. I'm Can. Subscribe for more videos about the psychology behind behaviors most people misunderstand. Goodbye and see you next time.